The prairie at dusk stretched out like a wounded him. The horizon bled purple into black, and the wind carried the smell of dust and old rain. Caleb Boone rode alone, a man stitched together with silence, his Bible tied shut in the saddlebag though he had not opened it in years. The leather cracked beneath his fingers whenever he touched it, like the skin of a memory that refused to heal. Coyotes howled in the distance, long, mournful notes that sounded almost like prayers left unanswered. He was a preacher once. Now he was a man without a pulpit, without a god, without even a reason to keep his head turned toward the sky. Each hoofbeat of his horse felt like a reminder that he was still moving, though he did not know toward what. When the town finally came into view, it looked less like salvation and more like something the desert had coughed up, a cluster of buildings hunched against the wind, lanterns flickering in windows as though afraid to burn too bright. Caleb tied up his horse outside the saloon. The batwing doors groaned as he entered. Inside, the air was thick with pipe smoke and sawdust. Conversations paused. Men's eyes narrowed. Whispers swirled. He felt it all in his bones, that silent judgment. The preacher, who had lost his God. The widower who had let his wife and child slip beneath fever's grip while he knelt useless in prayer. Out here, rumors ran faster than rivers, and shame was heavier than lead. He ordered coffee, black and bitter, though whiskey would have been kinder. It was then he saw her. In the farthest corner of the inn that doubled as a saloon, a woman sat wrapped in a heavy woolen blanket, though the night was not so cold. She did not drink, nor eat. She simply sat, her eyes visible above the blanket's edge, watching the fire but not seeing it. The others in the room pretended she was not there, pretended too hard. Their silence around her was louder than their laughter. When a group of ranch hands passed her table, one dropped a crust of bread at her feet as though tossing scraps to a stray dog. Caleb saw her flinch, draw the blanket tighter, and lower her head. Shame clung to her like smoke. Later, when the hour grew heavy, Caleb climbed the creaking stairs to his rented room. The inn smelled of lamp oil, damp wood, and fatigue. His room was small, just a cot, a chair, a basin. Through the thin wall, he heard something. A sound soft as morning. A woman's weeping, muffled into fabric. He froze, breath shallow. The voice was hers, the woman from the corner. The one wrapped in the blanket. Minutes passed. Then a whisper came through the wall, fragile as a dying ember. "Don't look under the blanket." Caleb sat in the darkness, his hands gripping the edges of the cot. The words rooted inside him, tangled like barbed wire. He could not answer. He did not know if she had spoken to him or to the silence itself. The next morning, the town wore its cruelty openly. Children were shooed away when they neared her. Women whispered into gloved hands. Men spit in the dirt when she passed. Caleb saw her struggle to carry a bucket of water, one arm trembling beneath the blanket. He moved to help, but she recoiled, her eyes filled with pleading shame. That night, he left a piece of bread and a slice of dried venison by her door. At dawn, when he stepped into the hall, the food was gone, and in its place sat a small folded cloth. Inside it, a single button sewn neatly, as though mended by careful hands. A trait of kindness, quiet as snowfall. For days this rhythm continued. He offered scraps of food, small mercies. She returned each one with a token, a patch mended on his torn sleeve, a cup of strong coffee left steaming outside his door. They did not speak, not properly. Their conversation lived in gestures, in the space between walls, in the silence of two people who had forgotten how to be seen. But each night, through the wall, he heard her voice tremble in the dark. Sometimes words, sometimes sobs. Always ending the same way. "Don't look under the blanket." The plea clung to him, more haunting than any sermon he had ever preached. What was she hiding? What curse did the town believe she carried? And why, when she whispered it, did it sound less like a warning and more like a prayer? One evening, as the storm gathered over the desert, Caleb found himself standing in the inn's narrow hallway, his hand pressed against the thin wood between their rooms. Her voice came again, broken, a crack in the night. "Please, don't look." He closed his eyes, forehead resting against the doorframe. He wanted to tell her he understood, that he too carried something too heavy to name. But the words died in his throat, as they always did. Instead, he whispered into the silence, "I won't." But in his heart, he knew it was a promise he might not be able to keep. The sky outside cracked with lightning. Shadows bled across the walls. And somewhere, in the quiet between thunder and breath, two souls began circling each other, shamed, exiled, bound by the weight of secrets and the hunger for even the smallest kindness. And the story, like the storm, was only just beginning. Morning light crawled across the town like a thief ashamed of its own crime. Dust hung in the air, catching in throats, and the bell at the smithy rang hollow. Caleb Boone walked through it all with his hat pulled low, aware of every gaze that clung to him. He had chosen his place, and now the town chose to remind him of it. It began with whispers at the well. "He sits with her." The widow under the blanket. "Preacher's gone soft in the head, damned like she is." Their words fell against him like stones, and though he did not flinch outwardly, each syllable scraped bone. At the inn's long table, Mara Delaney sat at her usual corner, swaddled in the thick woolen blanket though the air inside was stifling. Caleb sat opposite her that morning, his plate of beans and bread cooling while he waited. A hush fell. Men smirked, women lifted brows, and a boy snickered. Caleb's fork scraped the tin plate like a line drawn in sand. Mara's eyes flicked to him only once, quick as a sparrow. He thought he saw gratitude in them, but also fear, the kind of fear born from too many betrayals. That night, the inn was hushed, storm clouds pressing against the windows. Caleb fixed the broken hinge on Mara's door, tools borrowed from the stable. He said nothing. She said nothing. Only when he finished and turned to leave did he notice a tin cup of coffee steaming on the small table by her door. She had left it for him. A small gesture. A fragile bridge. For days, their silent ritual grew roots. He mended her doorframe. She stitched the tear in his coat. He left half an apple by her plate. She left a flower pressed in paper on his pillow. Nothing was spoken, yet each exchange built a language the world outside would not understand. One evening, while lightning prowled across the sky, Mara spoke. Her voice was raw from disuse, like a violin string drawn too tight. "You should not sit with me." Her eyes did not meet his. "It will damn you too." Caleb's hand stilled on the table. He considered the weight of her words. Then, softly, without ceremony, he said, "I've already been damned." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. For the first time, Mara's eyes met his fully, no blanket pulled over them. What he saw there was not madness nor curse, but a loneliness deeper than any grave. The townsfolk's cruelty swelled as if sensing his defiance. Silas Crow, the foreman with a grin like a cleaver, cornered him outside the saloon one dusk. "You're keeping company with her," Silas sneered, spitting tobacco into the dust. "Best be careful, Boone. That blanket's hiding more than shame. You lift it, you'll see why God spat her out." The men with him laughed, their boots grinding grit into the earth. Caleb said nothing, but his hand clenched around the Bible in a saddlebag that he still carried like a relic of a man he no longer was. That night, thunder shook the walls. Caleb lay awake, staring at the ceiling boards, listening for the sound he had come to expect. It came, Mara's voice, thin and trembling through the wall. "Don't look under the blanket." This time it wasn't a warning, but a plea. A prayer. He pressed his palm to the wall, as though touch could cross wood. His chest ached. He remembered his wife's fevered body years ago, her skin hot as fire under his trembling hands. He had prayed then, prayed until his knees bled, to a God who did not answer. He remembered holding his daughter as her breaths grew shallow, as her small hand slipped from his. He had looked to heaven for mercy, and the sky had given him nothing but silence. Now here was Mara, begging him not to see, not to uncover. And yet his heart burned with the old ache, the need to understand, to look, to find something to hold on to in this ruin of a world. A storm cracked the night open. Lightning flashed, shadows dancing across the walls. In the next room, Mara's voice broke into sobs. Caleb rose, bare feet on the cold floorboards, and stood outside her door. He hesitated only a breath. Then his hand pressed the latch. Inside, the room was dim, lit by a single lamp. Mara slept fitfully on the narrow bed, the blanket wrapped around her body like a cocoon. Her face, in the lamplight, looked peaceful and tortured all at once, as though she dreamed of fire. He should have left. He should have honored her plea. But the weight of curiosity, of compassion, of the ache of wanting to know, was heavier than the storm. Caleb knelt. His fingers trembled as they touched the edge of the blanket. The fabric was coarse, rough against his skin. For a moment he froze, his breath thick in his throat. Then, slowly, carefully, he lifted it. What he saw made his lungs seize, his heart stumble. His eyes widened, not in disgust, but in something deeper, a kind of terror mingled with awe. The blanket slipped from his hands as though burned. He staggered back, chest heaving. The lamp flickered. And in that moment, Caleb Boone stopped believing in God. The storm raged outside. Mara stirred, pulling the blanket tighter in her sleep, as though some part of her knew. Caleb pressed a hand to his chest, trembling, feeling the old weight of scripture turn to ash inside him. What lay under the blanket was no curse, but it was something that shattered the last fragile remnant of his faith. And for the first time in years, Caleb Boone felt truly alone. Dawn crept into the desert like a thief ashamed of its own trespass. The storm had broken, but its echoes lingered in the damp earth, in the aching quiet. Caleb Boone sat outside the inn, hat in his hands, eyes hollow. He had not slept. The image of what lay beneath Mara's blanket clung to him like smoke in his lungs. Scars. Not grotesque, not monstrous, but terrible and radiant, like molten glass frozen mid-breath. Her body bore the fire's kiss, skin patterned in ridges and swirls, the map of a night when flame had tried to claim her and failed. He had expected deformity, perhaps madness, perhaps proof of the devil the town whispered about. What he found was harder to bear, survival that looked like damnation, beauty and ruin fused into one. He remembered Silas Crow's words, "You lift that blanket, you'll see why God spat her out." But what Caleb had seen made him believe not in a cruel God, nor in any God at all, but in something harsher, an indifferent world that burned without reason, and a woman who carried the embers in her very skin. The door behind him creaked. Mara stood there, wrapped in the blanket still, her face pale in the gray light. Her eyes flicked to him, saw the truth written in his gaze. "You looked." Her voice was not accusation. It was resignation. A wound reopening. "You will leave me now like the rest." Caleb turned the brim of his hat in his hands, words slow and breaking. "I thought I'd find proof of the devil, or of God's wrath." He lifted his eyes to hers. "But what I saw was a fire still clinging to you. You walked out of hell itself, and it was not God who let you live. That's why I can't believe anymore." Her lips trembled. For the first time, she let the blanket slip just a little, showing the faint shimmer of scarred skin at her collarbone. Shame and defiance warred in her face. "Then you are more cursed than I am," she whispered. The town, however, would not let silence be the end. By dusk, the rumor had spread. Caleb had seen beneath the widow's blanket. Men muttered outside the inn, voices sharp as knives. Torches flickered in calloused hands. The mob came like a tide, and at its head, Silas Crow with his grin like rusted iron. "Come out, Boone," he called, voice thick with triumph. "You've been keeping company with a witch, and tonight we'll send her back to the fire that should have taken her." Caleb stepped into the doorway, revolver at his side, though his hand shook. Behind him, Mara clutched the blanket around her shoulders, breath quick, eyes wide. Silas spat into the dust. "Stand aside, preacher. You've lost your God, you've lost your way. Don't lose your life, too." The crowd muttered agreement, boots scuffing the dirt, faces lit by torchlight. Caleb's heart pounded, but his voice, when it came, was steady. She's no witch. She's no curse. She's the only one here who's tasted hell and walked back breathing. You call that a mark of the devil? I call it survival. The torches wavered. Some faces shifted, uncertain. But Silas only sneered. Then you'll burn with her. He raised his gun. The world seemed to pause. Caleb drew, not with the speed of youth, but with the weight of conviction. The shots cracked the night open. One bullet tore through Caleb's shoulder, spinning him back. His revolver thundered once, and Silas Crow dropped into the dust, torchlight licking his fallen body. The mob gasped, scattered like crows startled by thunder. Silence fell, broken only by Caleb's ragged breath. He sank to his knees, hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. Mara was at his side in an instant, the blanket slipping as she tried to stanch the wound with trembling hands. For the first time in years, the fabric did not fully hide her. In the torchlight's fading glow, her scars gleamed, terrible, beautiful, undeniable. Caleb's gaze met hers, not with horror, but with reverence. He lifted his uninjured hand, placed it gently over hers, the scarred and the broken touching as equals. I don't see a curse, he whispered. I see a woman who lived. Tears filled her eyes, spilling down cheeks that had been dry too long. She let the blanket fall from her shoulders entirely, as if his words had finally loosened its grip. The night air touched her bare scars, and for once, she did not flinch. The torches guttered out. The crowd was gone. Only the desert remained, vast, silent, and watching. Epilogue, reflective closing. Days later, Caleb's wound began to heal. He and Mara shared meals without walls between them, their silence no longer born of shame, but of quiet companionship. The innkeeper Etta May left bread at their door without comment, and no one in town dared speak of the night Silas Crow fell. But sometimes, in the stillness, Mara would catch Caleb staring at the sky as though searching for something. And he would admit, softly, that he no longer prayed, but he was learning to believe again. Not in heaven, but in the fragile strength of hands that chose to hold on. And so the story closed not with a sermon, but with a lesson written in scars and silence. If you ever meet someone who begs you not to look, remember this. It is not the truth beneath the blanket that damns us. It is how we choose to see it. Some carry fire on their skin, shame in their bones, grief in their eyes. If you are brave enough to stay, to see them whole, you may discover that what others call cursed is in fact holy. Out here, in the dust and wind, faith is not in churches or in heaven. It is in two broken souls finding the courage to stand in the light together.